All our prices is set in stone. Flick flaws.
Champagne toast just amongst my folks.
Ross has just always been one of my favorite rappers ever.
Gotta know, are you putting the Drake beef to rest?
Honestly, I discuss a lot of things. You know, set in stone is all about etching a little bit at a time.
I don't understand. You're squashing the beef. So I don't know if that means
Ricky Rose is.
How y'all don't ever say, yo, all that brotherhood we was showing y'all in the videos and how we was carrying it, and it was collabs every summer, and it was all a facade.
What's to say it's a facade though?
No,
because he's saying it was never that.
He's saying it was solid.
No, don't get it up. Nothing about that was fake. Nothing about that was fake. If a fuck with you, a nigga fuck with you. If it's something that go left, that's when it go left.
Yeah, up to that point, it was
go left right now on this podcast. It wasn't fake. Before that,
but that's where,
showing love.
But that's where I'm pushing back.
If you thought hip-hop reached its absolute peak of psychological decay during the Great Beef Wars, wrap your brain around this absolute train wreck. Two grown multimillionaires are currently engaged in a mud-slinging contest that makes high school cafeteria drama look like a United Nations peace summit. The boy from Toronto just resurfaced from his emotional bunker to utterly obliterate Rick Ross's brand new studio album, declaring it an auditory crime so horrific that it actually makes his own heavily panned Iceman project sound like a timeless, immortal masterpiece by comparison.
Ross, a quick Google search says that your net worth is $150 million. Is that accurate?
They said it, duh.
That's my car. That's my car.
The sheer delusion required to weaponize your own critically baseline album to roast your enemy is an elite level of rap narcissism we have simply never witnessed before. Stop right there. Do not scroll past, do not pass go, and do not pretend you aren't completely addicted to this toxic circus. Hit that subscribe button right now because we are serving raw, unfiltered hip-hop chaos before it gets scrubbed by corporate lawyers. Drop a comment down below right this second telling me whose album was actually worse. And smash that like button and share this with your group chat, because if you don't, I will personally force you to listen to both of these albums on a 24-hour loop without earplugs. Now, let's step back and survey the wreckage, because the timeline is currently spiraling into pure, unadulterated madness. To truly understand the gravity of this legendary hateration, you have to remember how we got to this point in the first place. Not too long ago, Rick Ross parked his massive frame on a podcast couch, puffed on a cigar the size of a traffic cone, and told the entire world that listening to Drake's Iceman album made him feel like he had physically lost an hour of his life he could never recover. Rose called the project horrendous, mocked the streaming numbers, and basically categorized Drake as a washed-up pop star ghost town. It was petty, it was personal, and it set the entire internet ablaze with memes of bubble Drizzy weeping into his designer silk sheets. So what does Drake do? Does he take the high road? Does he retreat into his massive embassy mansion, count his hundreds of millions of dollars, and drink expensive wine in peace? Absolutely not. This is Aubrey Graham. We are talking about the petty crown prince of suburban vengeance. The moment Rick Ross finally dropped his long-awaited project, Drake was sitting in the dark like a villain in a comic book, waiting to pounce. He immediately unleashed a Scorched-Earth teardown, calling Ross's new body of work an absolute pile of steaming, uninspired garbage. But here is the magnificent psychological plot twist that makes this entire scenario so deliciously ironic. Drake didn't just call it bad, he explicitly said it was worse than Iceman. Think about the self-awareness required to pull a move like that. That is the music equivalent of saying, yeah, I might have served you a slice of stale, moldy bread, but you just handed the public a plate of literal lawn clippings and called it fine dining. Let that sit in your brain for a second. Drake is actively using his own widely mocked, heavily criticized album as the baseline measurement for absolute failure, and placing Rick Ross comfortably beneath it, if you listen closely. You can almost hear the existential crisis occurring inside the OVO headquarters. We are watching two men in their late 30s and early 40s who used to make chart-topping luxury rap hits together about jet-setting to private islands and smoking expensive cigars, now reduced to weaponizing Spotify playback metrics and tracklist skips to see who can inflict maximum ego damage. Let's dissect the actual music for a moment, because the sheer contrast in artistic desperation is breathtaking. On one hand, you have Rick Ross, a man who has built an entire multi-decade career on 3 fundamental pillars: deep baritone grunting, aggressive luxury boasts, and riding over cinematic, horn-heavy Maybach music beats like a comic book mob boss. For 20 years, Rose has given us the exact same formula, wrapping himself in velvet robes and pretending he single-handedly runs the entire global supply chain from a mansion in Atlanta. But according to Drake and a very vocal group of online critics, that formula has officially decayed into self-parody. Listening to a new Rick Ross album in this day and age feels like walking into a luxury furniture store that hasn't updated its inventory since 2011. Everything looks expensive, but it smells faintly of mothballs, and you've seen every single item on display 1,000 times before. On the other hand, you have Drake, who tried to throw everything including the kitchen sink at his recent drops just to see what sticks to the wall. Iceman was packed with moody paranoia, bitter callouts, and aggressive subliminals aimed at literally half the music industry, from former friends to NBA stars. Drake was out here rapping like a guy who checked his ex-girlfriend's location history at 3 a.m. and decided to make it everyone else's problem. So when Ross slammed Iceman as a snooze fest, Drake took that personally and waited for the exact right moment to deliver his retaliation punch. The moment Ross dropped his project, Drake's response was swift, brutal, and completely merciless. He basically told the public that Ross's project sounds like it was generated by an AI prompt programmed with generic boat music from 2014. And you know what the worst part is? The internet actually agreed. Social media platforms immediately erupted into an absolute war zone of hilarious reaction videos, track-by-track teardowns, and endless memes mocking both artists for engaging in what is essentially a race to the bottom. When you strip away the massive chains, the private jets, the streaming numbers, and the billionaire posturing, what are we actually witnessing here? We are witnessing the tragic, hilarious, slow-motion crumbling of a rap alliance that once defined an entire era of hip-hop culture. Years ago, a Drake and Rick Ross collaboration was an automatic, guaranteed classic. Tracks like Aston Martin Music, Lord Knows, and Stay Shemin were the soundtrack to every high roller fantasy in America. They had a chemistry that felt bulletproof. Ross provided the booming, larger-than-life weight, and Drake provided the smooth, melodic hooks that guaranteed radio dominance. They were the ultimate dynamic duo of opulent rich guy rap. Fast forward to today, and that iconic brotherhood has degenerated into a public pettiness spectacle where they act like bitter exes fighting over who gets custody of the aux cord. Drake is out here analyzing Ross's album flow like a music theory professor looking for flaws, while Ross is making podcast appearances doing vocal impressions of Drake's singing voice. It is chaotic, it is completely unnecessary, and it is easily the most entertaining train wreck happening in pop culture right now. Think about the psychological warfare taking place behind the scenes. Drake didn't just throw a quick shade post on his Instagram story and call it a day. He systematically dissected the release to ensure maximum psychological damage by directly comparing Ross's new project to Iceman, a project that Ross himself openly publicly trashed. Drake effectively turned Ross's own criticism into a trap. He essentially said, if my album was a 0 out of 10, then yours is a -5. It is a move of pure, unadulterated petty genius. It shifts the entire narrative from Drake made a bad album to Rick Ross can't even make an album as good as Drake's worst album. That is grandmaster level trolling, and whether you love Drake or hate him, you have to respect the absolute dedication to being the biggest hater in the room. Meanwhile, Rick Ross isn't just going to sit back and take that quietly. You know the boss is somewhere in his 109-room mansion, wearing a silk robe, sipping expensive bubbly, and frantically drafting his next podcast appearance to explain why his album is actually a masterclass in classic hip-hop, while Drake's entire discography is built on corporate smoke and mirrors. He's probably setting up another interview right now just to call Drake a swimming pool enthusiast who raps over elevator beats. The back and forth has reached a point where the actual music barely even matters anymore. Nobody is listening to these albums to appreciate the intricate lyricism, the sonic innovation, or the emotional depth. We are listening strictly to gather evidence for the ongoing internet trial. We have officially entered the spite era of hip-hop, where projects are greenlit, produced, and dropped not out of artistic inspiration, but out of sheer, unadulterated spite against your enemies. Artists are no longer trying to make the greatest album of all time. They are trying to make an album that allows them to point fingers at their rivals and say, at least I didn't drop that. It is a race to see who can survive the tidal wave of online mockery while throwing just enough mud back across the fence to keep their fan bases engaged. So where does this leave us, the exhausted, amused, and completely bewildered listeners? We are trapped in the middle of a multi-million-dollar food fight between two rap titans who refuse to grow up, and honestly, we wouldn't have it any other way. As long as Drake keeps holding grudges and Rick Ross keeps feeding the podcast ecosystem with hilarious insults, we are guaranteed an endless stream of pure, unfiltered comedy. Both of these guys are far too wealthy, far too famous, and far too proud to ever bow out gracefully. This beef isn't going to end with a squash, a handshake, or a surprise collaboration track. It is going to end with both of them dropping rival albums on the exact same day, just to see who can trick the algorithms into giving them more fake internet validation. The rap landscape has officially transformed into a high-stakes, full-contact soap opera, and this latest chapter between Drake and Rick Ross is proving that no matter how much money you acquire, no matter how many records you sell, and no matter how many Grammys sit on your shelf, you are never too big to act completely childish on the internet. Grab your popcorn, settle in, and watch the burn, because this feud is far from over and the next round of petty insults is already loading on the timeline.